Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This thing is a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I love that Clark is kind of geeking out about the whole Harvest Fest thing. Like, obviously, he's just like, oh, come on, it's like, oh, it'd be this and that, and I don't know, it's interesting to see him kind of be the dorky Clark that he is, but also because for him, it's such a big, important tradition in Smallville. He says it's basically been a thing in Smallville since it was founded. His mom would spend weeks in preparation for it, and obviously he feels like this is a good family moment. It's a very big part of Smallville, and he wants his kids to partake about it, because for him, it's like, it'll show you like the best of Smallville. It's kind of like, it's not just about the stuff they sell, it's about sharing, being there for each other, you know, that community aspect of Smallville. And I thought that was I think it's a beautiful sentiment and everything. So obviously they're donating a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously there's the, Sharon Powell and Derek situation where she's like, hey, my son, he's back, he's fine and everything. So all this Morgan Edge stuff, I want to drop it because there is no story, because I get my son back. Which obviously Lois is just kind of like, okay, and just drop it. But Chrissy's like, there's no way we're just dropping this. And she's like, are you forgetting, Sharon? A super strong person came out and tried to kill you. She's like, I'm just going to... But she's like, Chrissy's not letting it go. Like, her reporter instincts are kicking in. She's like... Very much like this episode, she talks about WWLLS. No, WWLLD. What would Lois Lane do? Or just 1L, whatever the case may be. Her reporter instincts are kicking because she's like, that felt too orchestrated. So I'm assuming, they don't really go into the episode, but I'm assuming Morgan returned her son and was like, you got your son back. Hey, I brought your son back to you. Now shut up. Let this all go. And it's like, I'm happy to have my son back. Or maybe it's just someone else came on Morgan's behalf. Maybe it was Leslie. Maybe not. But Derek it's just like the story he was telling too. Just amnesia. They helped me remember. What about that call? I don't remember. But, neither one of them is really trying to press buttons until like they're at the place, where the donations are being dropped off. And then Derek starts going through something and his heat vision activates. He ends up burning the place down because it's too much for him to control. He ended up calling Leslie. Luckily, Clark came there without going Superman, because the last thing you want is Superman popping up at Smallville. It's like, oh, why would Superman come to Smallville to deal with a small fire? It doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, you can make some excuse about, oh, I'm flying around and stuff like that. It just happened. It's like, nah, Clark can't have Clark Kent and Superman be in too many places. So he kind of has to low-key handle as Clark Kent using his freeze breath. What I thought was interesting though is Kyle's like, what, Frost? Like, when it's all said and done. I mean, now that's probably going to start making things look a little suspicious, but something's going on here. It's sad what that kind of ended up trickling out and turning into, because obviously his friend Mitch got hurt and Tom Mitchell got hurt, but obviously it sent him spiraling a little bit. Obviously he's drinking because like his friend, they're saying like he was too exposed to the smoke, so there could be like long lasting damage, but he went out for drinks, which Lana's like, you were out drinking. He's like, we had one in his honor, and it's like, he's like, I had a hard day and everything. And Sarah being like, no, don't worry, Mom, take my sister, go, I'll stay here with Dad. And I thought it was so interesting because her dad was like, Kyle was like, hey, you remember that song I used to sing to you when you were little? She was like, stop. She's like, that was a long time ago. He's like, yeah, life kind of moves fast. And she's like, I'm going to go. And he's like, yeah, go on ahead. And then as she, like, him calling her that nickname, it seemed like it rubbed her the wrong way. Because we don't know the ins and outs. Like, she's probably been there, like, more often than not. I mean, I think, once again, that's why she took all the pills. Like, she felt like life became too much. And I think her dad's drinking played one part in that. Because obviously, her and her mom are in a better place, but I think her and her dad aren't, because her dad's not in a good place. He's drinking a lot, like, rather than really dealing with his issues, what's there, him not even realizing it is an issue, because we don't know what that, like, she's probably had to witness time and time again about her dad, because that's the thing, everyone's kind of spiraling with their own troubles. Like, for example, like, Jonathan, he was so excited, so, oh, Eliza's popping back and everything, and I was like, yeah, and she sadly ends up breaking up with him. He's like, wait, you're supposed to come to the Harvest Festival and everything. Sarah even invited, wanted to go with Jordan, which Jonathan was like, hey, let me answer for my brother, he totally want to go with you. And he's like, yeah, so things work out on that front, but not so much on Jonathan's front, because Eliza dumps him. And obviously kind of lashes out a little bit at everyone, because everything's coming up Jordan. Football team, I don't even really get to play. Like, the things that were kind of his are gone. Like, and it's I think that's got to take its toll on you, where basically both of your lives are inverses now, where it's like Jordan was a more social one. He had all the friends, he had the life, he was living it up, and Jordan was the outsider. Now Jordan's the one living it up, and now he's the outsider. Like, Sarah and Jordan had that conversation last episode about Jonathan, about like, yeah, it's got to be tough for being Mr. Popular to going to being an outsider. We're used to being an outsider, so that's one thing. But when you've kind of lived your life not being one, it's hard to kind of go back. Go to becoming one. And like I said, he's lashing out at everybody, lashing out at his dad, being like, oh, you don't know what it's like, not really listening to his mom. Because his mom is like, she's like, I was a teenage girl at one point in time, so I know what it's like. She might be kind of, maybe given enough time, she'll remember what was so special between you and kind of realize, hey, maybe it was a mistake. And even if she doesn't, then that's her loss, But it's like, oh yeah, obviously he kind of snaps at his mom a little bit. Obviously he's a teenager, so it's like she's understanding. Obviously Clark are trying to be understanding too, but especially when he snaps at Clark, because it's like, you let Jordan play football, and you didn't get too mad at him. Granted, he did. Let's not forget, Jonathan, you're the one that kind of smoothed things over on that front. You made your dad a little bit more understanding, and even Jordan did it on his own behalf by being like, yo, I really enjoy it. It makes me feel good, So you kind of both played a part in making sure everything kind of smoothed out for Jordan, but also for him, it's like, I left my friends behind. I won't even get to play football anymore. Like, he blames his dad because it's like, you don't. I was like, oh, what? While you're off being Superman, you know exactly how I feel. You and Superboy, blah 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 blah, and kind of a dick saying all this stuff. And Clark is just like, nah, go, Jordan. Like, go have fun at the Harvest Fest. And Jonathan goes and gets drunk, and kind of that's what set things off with Sarah, because Sarah was like, wait, you're here, you idiots are drinking, like, you coming from the perfect family, you want to act like, you want to drink and feel like there's not going to be any consequences. So that's why she was lashing out at him, because it was a reminder of her dad getting drunk all the time. So that's why I'm like, we don't know how often, like, how many years it's been. It might not just be a recent thing. Maybe it is. Maybe that most recently is why she took all those pills like a year ago. A year ago was like, that's when it started and it was at its worst, or it just happened it's been going on for a while, but it got at its worst at that point in time. So we don't know. Like, obviously her family's not perfect. Obviously, once again, that's the thing. No family is perfect. But for Sarah on the outside looking in, it's like, you have a great family. Your mom and dad are great. They're not fighting all the time. Like, you have a good brother. Like, your life is great, and you're kind of taking it for granted. From someone who kind of is on the shitty side of things, like, at least when it comes to certain aspects of her family. Like I said, her and her mom are only just getting good. Like, obviously she has some issues, like I said, with her dad, but still, like, she was even trying to talk to Jordan about it. Like, obviously there was so much weighing down on her. Like, she didn't want this to be like, a story of a time they spent together talking about sad times and stories. But Jordan's, because she's like, oh yeah, my therapist is probably sick of hearing me talk about it all the time. And Jordan's like, you can confide in me. But Jonathan kind of screwed things up, and I thought was really neat. And I think because Jordan realizes, like, hey, you're always there for me, let me be there for you. When Jonathan was like, I'm so sorry I screwed things up, he's like, it's okay. Like, come on, let's just go get you water. It was like, he could have easily snapped, but for him, it's like, no, like, you're always there for me at my low, so let me be there for you, bro. I think that was beautiful for that to kind of, even at this point in the series, for that to kind of come back in that regard. Granted, Clark smelled the alcohol on him and was like, get out of it. Well, their mom really snapped and was like, just go home, both of you, faster and everything. So there's things on that front. There's the Derek situation, which turns out him and Leslie, she isn't just like, like the one that kind of mediates a lot of that stuff. Her and Derek were actually a thing. I don't know whether she legitimately had feelings for him, and maybe in that time, like, we're quote unquote super freaks, like, in the sense that we both have these powers, we're experiments, and they found each other through that, or whether it was just a manipulation, like the relationship was just a facade to kind of keep him hook, line, and sinker. I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting, because it seems like out of everyone, because we don't know what Derek's situation is. Like, it seemed like he became unstable. It became too much for him to control. We see that Leslie has powers, so she's able to kind of control them to a certain extent, but maybe it's kind of a hit and miss experiment where it's like some people it's worked out, other people it hasn't. It probably takes like the right culmination of a lot of stuff to make it happen. Maybe because his circumstances were a little different, because he ends up telling Clark later on, I'm already dead. I was resurrected. So he might admit that literally, like Derek might have died in the mining accident. In Carthage, he might have actually died, but it's like, hey, your boy he's dead, so let me grab him. You know, he's going to go missing, but who cares? And I'm going to resurrect him and see what this yellow kryptonite X-kryptonite is able to do. So not only did it bestow him powers, it might have resurrected him for all we know. I love how this all came about because Chrissy kind of, once again, did her own investigation. She's like, she followed Leslie and Derek. Well, followed Derek and landed, that big scoop landed in her lap. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm glad things didn't go sideways, like Leslie finding out or something like that. Luckily, she contacted Lois, and obviously Clark overheard, so... But obviously, it's not what I thought it was either, because I thought maybe like each one of them would individually get one power. Like that dude had superhuman strength. I thought Leslie would just have the heat vision, but was it like last episode we found out like, oh no, she has superhuman strength as well, as we see in this guy with Derek. Derek has the superhuman strength, the power of flight, and the heat vision. So maybe the X-kryptonite is more refined. Well, it probably reacts very much like Kryptonian DNA does to the sun. Maybe that's what that machine is. Maybe the machine is like an artificial sun. Like it generates the same energy that the sun's rays generate that gives Kryptonians their super abilities. Maybe it's kind of like, I would assume, because it's very bright and kind of like the color of it is very similar to the sun. So it might be kind of like an artificial sun. Interesting enough, obviously on the Flash they have like an artificial speed force, so it's interesting. Like it might be something of that nature. What I thought was really interesting too is that Leslie was like, "Don't worry, he's not. Morgan's not going to find out. We're going to fix this." So because later on he made like a generous donation, so it helps him out publicly look like a good guy, but also it is to make up for the fact is, damn it, I am responsible for this. Granted, I guess he has found out. I would assume he did, obviously probably not too happy with Leslie. Once again, that whole Leslie and Derek thing could have just been a ploy the entire time. We don't know whether that was genuine or not. But before, Derek said, protect the asset. Now, either that's where, and when he was talking, like there was another voice, so he might have been programmed. Because it seemed at one point he was freaking out, and then like when he was calling Leslie, and then he was like, we need to see, like he turned into someone different. But when he was talking to Clark, there was like another like automated voice on top of his, so he might be being controlled. So I don't know, like, so when these people get resurrected, like Morgan might be making them into like super soldiers essentially, like at his disposal. But the fact is, it's like protect the asset. I don't know whether that was supposed to be Leslie, because she might have been the first, and she might be the only success story. Maybe even she has her own flaws that we're just not aware of yet. But it just seems like Home Dudu tried to kill Lois and Sharon. Seemed like maybe his powers were maybe perfected as well. We don't know. We don't know how many people, they've replicated this with. Maybe everything Morgan has been doing obviously is about getting some of this kryptonite. Obviously, Smallville ends up being one place, but who's to say all these other places weren't places that had some as well? We don't know. I mean, makes you wonder how long is that maybe that kryptonite basically ended up like that X-kryptonite, because of the methane and all the stuff in Smallville mixed with the kryptonite, changing it from from green to yellow. Once again, we don't know the byproduct of like, I don't know if they even went over that in Smallville, like how, why, maybe they did. It's been a while since I've seen all of Smallville, so maybe they went over why some of the kryptonite, some is green while others ended up being different colors. Like I said, whether they fully dive into that in this series as well, who knows. But I also thought it was an interesting development in this, how they cut back and forth between a younger Clark, doing his thing, saving the day. It's like, all right, I have to go to the Harvest Festival, yada, yada, yada. But, what I thought was so interesting, though, is like the parallels they try to draw between Clark and what Jonathan's feeling. Because for Clark, it's like, I totally understand. Like, that's why Jonathan was like, I'm sorry. But he's like, no, it's good. He's like, I tried to tell you before. I know exactly how you felt. So we're going to, like, stay of your punishment. You get off free this one time. And it's like, really? Because even Lois was shocked. I don't even love her calling him a softie. He's like, yeah, I guess I am. But it's because he was like, I was a little older than you when I left Smallville. And obviously that's been one of his biggest regrets, because he left Smallville, and Lois completes it by being like, he never came back. Like, he popped in every once in a while probably to check on his mom, but other than that, like, he never actually came back to live in Smallville. Like, he left it behind because for him, he felt like he had to be something more. Like, because of what it powers and everything. It's like, Dad created these rules. Dad said I was meant for more. She's like, I know, me and your dad both know that you were meant for more, but that had to be its own struggles, you know, Clark feeling like, oh, especially because she's like, all right, we'll wait to give you this, but maybe it'll give you answers to what you're supposed, and the crystal to his ship probably led to him unlocking a lot of answers he had about who he is and what his destiny is, being on this earth for so much more. And his mom having to let him go, you know, it's that was, you know, got to be the hardest thing of like, you know. And the thing is, you know, for Clark, it's his biggest regret because he never came back. My mom only had so much life to kind of give, and she used it on me, and then I just up and leave the nest. And yeah, I checked in, but still, like, being Superman became his focus. He wanted to be much more than Clark Kent. And I think that's so interesting, like the inverse of what the show is, because you take something like Smallville, which is all about Clark Kent rising and becoming Superman. In this, it's Superman learning how to be Clark Kent again. I think that's so interesting to kind of take that story in the inverse of like realizing that Clark Kent is just important, because as Superman has its purposes and importance to the world, but Clark Kent does as well to both, you know, Lois, to Jordan and Jonathan as well. You know, I think that's so beautiful in its own right. But also, you know, the sad situation with Derek killing himself like that. I guess it's like he activated his heat vision and he just basically turned it inwards until he basically exploded. But for him, maybe he felt like, I need to do this. I was already dead. I was given my second chance. So once again, we don't know the ins and outs of that. What I thought was really interesting is when Lex went out of his way, well, Luthor went out of his way, because I don't know if his name is actually Lex or not in this world. I think they said his name at one point in time. I think like Sam from that other world said his name, but I don't remember. We'll just go with Captain Luthor for now. Because obviously he wants to keep tabs on Lois, because he's like, hey, you're all, anytime you're around, Superman's around. Which once again presses the fact is he doesn't know all there is to know about Superman, which I think is so interesting, because it's like kind of like using Krypton, for example. It's like Adam Strange coming to Krypton. It's like, oh, he doesn't know all there was to know about Superman. Like, oh, you have an idea of who Superman is and like some of his backstory, but even then he didn't know about like, oh, Brainiac is the destruction of Krypton, that's not necessarily connected to someone coming back in time and destroying it. It's like he thought he knew what Krypton's fate was, but he thought Brainiac was the one that came back in time, but not realizing Brainiac had a connection to Krypton's destruction. So, like, it's kind of like that. Like, he doesn't know about Clark Kent. He knows about Kal-El. He knows about Superman. He just doesn't know about Clark Kent, which I think is so fascinating. Maybe it's because in his world, who knows whether Clark Kent was ever a thing. Maybe he was always Kal-El. Maybe he was always Superman at world, so he never had the... I don't know. Because it was interesting, because it's like, because he doesn't know that Lois is married to Superman. He just knows anytime Lois goes anywhere, Superman, she keeps tabs on Superman, must know his secret identity or something. Obviously, like, he's been tracking them, but even he was surprised, wait, there's two of them? So I guess, because it begs the question, on his world, does Kara exist? Like, what happened to her? Like, the reason why he's kind of surprised that there's two of them, and it's like, so I guess maybe in his world, there's only one Kryptonian, and that's Clark. I mean, we don't know what happened to Kara. Maybe she's alive, maybe she's not. Because obviously she plays her own role in the Injustice, at least the video game. I don't know about the comic, you know, what they might do with this interpretation. Like, you know, once again, just the interesting timing, because they're going down that route at the same time. That's what Zack Snyder's Justice League goes down that route too. So I think that's so fascinating. But he ended up shooting both of them down, but by the time he got there, both of them were already gone. But the most frustrating thing for him is Lois and him were in his world, they were together. Now it's like, oh, he has to watch her be with someone else. And it makes you wonder, is this has to be like a crisis thing, right? Like a byproduct of, I mean, granted, their lives changed completely. We kind of dealt with that obviously in this week's episode of The Flash of like, you know, a timeline disappearing. Like, so either he's a byproduct of another world, another bygone timeline. So it makes you wonder, no, because obviously he's from like, well, the technology he has access to and stuff like that, it makes you wonder, like, the fact that Sam's around and everything, so it means he's from like a parallel world or timeline. I'd assume, oh, maybe it had to be a different world for him to have access to the technology he has. I don't know how you manage that, you know, unless it's like someone else's technology he's stolen. Well, I mean, he's a Luthor, so maybe maybe there's something more on that front. But I don't know. It's interesting to think about, like whether or not this is also going to tie into Supergirl, which starts up next week. We'll get to that in a second. But I don't know. But once again, he doesn't know that she's married to Superman. He doesn't know that, like, and he's probably going to integrate himself in their lives because he introduced himself as this reporter and stuff like that, which is like, because at first I was like, why do you know all this stuff about reporters and stuff like that? You came up with this alias on top. I was like, did your AI come up with all this? But it's like, no, you know all this stuff so well because you were married to Lois, which once again, it's got to suck meeting a parallel and being in a parallel world being like, oh, here's the woman I love, but she's married to someone else. Because especially for him, it's like everything about her is exactly the same, except she married someone else. What makes matters worse is she's married to your mortal enemy. But that's the sad thing. He's holding this world's Clark to the standards of another world Clark, because no one's ever exactly the same in parallel universe. There are just certain aspects of who they are resonate throughout the entire multiverse. But obviously, you know, you look at Cisco and Caitlin. Caitlin kind of interesting, but Cisco was a villain on Earth 2, not one on Earth 1. It is that situation of, you know, look at Frost. She started off as a villain, you know, obviously on Earth 2, but obviously this version of Caitlin on Earth 1, you know, and her and Frost where they are. So it's so, like, that's the thing. Like, he's so dead set on his revenge and hatred for Clark. It's like, I mean, to be fair, it's like that's a Luthor thing. It's like, it's almost like, that's the cosmic way of things always playing out, that there is always going to be Lex and there's going to always be Luthor and L bad blood. There's always going to be. Lena and Kara were like that not too long ago. Now, you know, Lex and Superman have always been known. Now it's Lex and Kara, but now it's always that. So now it's this Luthor versus Clark. It's almost like these two families are forever destined to be mortal enemies. But obviously we've seen that can be change with Lena and Kara's relationship, you know, them being the best friends that they are. Like, yeah, they had a bumpy road for a while, but to see, you know, where they are now, they're in a better place. So it isn't impossible, but this Luthor isn't probably willing to see Clark any other way, because for him it's like, no, he's destined to be a bad guy. That's always been Lex's thing of like, we can't trust a being this powerful, whether it's purely out of jealousy or whether it's just a situation of I can see him in a way that humanity isn't willing to see him, you know, that justification. So, but aside from all that though, I did think it was kind of a beautiful note of like that bitch being dedicated to Martha. It's like, yeah, like Martha would sit here and talk to anybody about anything. She was the best of Smallville. And I thought that was beautiful, especially when you hard cut to like her sending off, you know, the young Clark, and her kind of turning her head and crying because, you know, trying to be strong for his sake, which Clark is just like, she did all that, you know. It's for him, it's he's like, I messed up, I left, I shouldn't have left. And it's like, your mom wanted you to do that, like she knew what it meant, but she still sent you off anyway. And now they're in that position where Jonathan wants to kind of go off on his own. So it's like, obviously you give Smallville some time and see if it doesn't feel, you still don't feel that way, if you still don't feel that connection to Smallville, then we'll revisit this and, you know, potentially find other options. So I thought that was kind of an interesting direction for that as well. And where Sarah and Jonathan stand with the whole situation of, you know, she doesn't need a boyfriend right now. She'd rather just have a friend. It's kind of what he needs, which he's understanding, you know. So it's going to be interesting. You know, I think for him, he looks at it as a positive of, hey, but we get to spend time together. So that's, who knows, like, whether Jonathan really, Jordan, I'm going to do that a lot, I'm sorry. Jordan might not have had a lot of friends in Metropolis. We don't know. I think Sarah's the first person he's probably really connected to in a long time, you know, because he's always been, you know, the outsider, not just amongst just people in general, but also his family, you know. So I think, like I said, everything's kind of coming up him. Like he's, I think, in a better place with his family. He's in a better place with Jonathan. good place with Sarah. I think everything's kind of working out for him. He's happy. And then immediately at the end of the episode, he gets attacked by Tag, who's like, what did you do to me? Tell me. So either he overheard what he told Jonathan last episode about, I'm the reason why this happened to you. Because the last time we saw Tag, or at least heard about him, was like Sam being like, oh, we took him to his school for people like him. So it might be a thing of like, oh, we're weaponizing these kids, but trying to pretend like we're actually helping them. So, but it might be the thing is that Tag either overheard their conversation or maybe overheard Sam or someone else talking about why this happened to him. So he's probably blaming Jordan for what happened to him. Because Jordan himself is thinking, like, I'm the reason this happened. I think you are a small piece of what happened. The methane there mixed with your heat vision, I think, created that situation. Because, like, I think that's what happened. The methane or whatever was in that particular spot mixed with the kryptonite that's been buried deep on the ground creates the X kryptonite, the yellow goldish kryptonite. So, or maybe when he used his heat vision, he just activated the yellow kryptonite. Like, once again, Tag got affected. We don't know secretly if anyone else could have been affected as well. So there's an interesting, many moving pieces because obviously Tag's situation is definitely connected to all of the stuff that Morgan Edge has been up to, including what he's doing in Smallville. So it's going to be interesting to see where that ultimately all ends up taking us. Sadly, we're going to be waiting a while. I didn't watch the preview because I was watching this on the CW app, so I don't know the specific date it's supposed to come back. I believe it's in May, because the show is going on hiatus so that they can finish up the production before they return with the season. But in that time, obviously, as I brought up earlier, Supergirl's 6th and final season premieres next Tuesday. Yes, so it's going to be taking Superman and Lois's spot in that time frame. So I'm really excited to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, but also seeing like any potential ties this has with Supergirl or anything kind of gets covered on that front, because I'm really excited to see what happens this season. So I'd assume cousins and everything that these storylines will converge. Probably might not be in a big way because it's probably just going to keep them separate. Let Kara's story be 100% her own. Let Clark's and Lois's be theirs own as well. But I'm sure there's going to be some crossover over the course of these seasons. But I'm really interested to see what that might be, whether it's big or small crossovers. But yeah, that's really all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.